Hello there and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Craig Telfer and right now I am joined by my close associate Shaughan McGuigan.
Hello there.
And you know what happens when the Brian Johnson and Talmadge Johnson of the Terrace get together? That's right, Shaughan is going to steal my plasma in a bid to live to the age of 200 and he's also going to measure my erections.
These people don't sound like wrestlers.
No, they're not. It's that guy, Brian Johnson, you know, the tech bro that's trying to defy the ageing process.
Oh, he looks really weird.
Yeah,
really weird.
Well, that's why. So that's why I've compared him. You are the Brian Johnson, I'm his son, and I've basically just been birthed to sustain your life, really.
Have you watched the documentary about him?
No, I haven't. Is it worth watching?
I've not watched it. I will watch it. I've only seen. I have seen an interview with him, and he's just a really creepy, odd guy, and I don't think he'll make it to 150 or whatever he's trying to get to.
I've read bits and pieces about his lifestyle and his bid to live to the age of 150, and you think it sounds really restrictive. I mean, you could be doing all that and then just leave the house next day and get run over by a bin lorry. I just think you just wasted your life. Shaughan and I are going to be talking about some lower league Scottish football. We'll be guiding you through the Championship, League 1 and League 2 by examining one game from each division, talking about them in depth, and if we're lucky, have a laugh at some point. It almost happened 30 seconds ago. It almost happened 30 seconds ago, but who knows? One of us might giggle without provocation.
Let's see what we can do.
How is everything with you otherwise, Shaughan? Everything good?
Very well. How are you?
Yes, aye, good. Though I said in last week's podcast, I was very disappointed to have missed out on the opportunity to open a new Tesco in Stenhousemuir, and I saw a video clip of Ross and John from the Falkirk Daft podcast opening it. I've never been more envious of two people in my entire life. It looked like two people having the most fun there's possibly able to have on the entire planet. And the fact that I was not there, I was stuck in the office replying to emails, doing editing and so on. I was hurt. I was hurt. It looked great fun.
Do you think some of the people turned up in the hope that you were opening it?
I don't think so. I think if they knew I was there, they wouldn't have gone. They'd have chosen to shop at an Asda or a Sainsbury's. I think my being there would have irrevocably damaged the brand Tesco.
I think you're doing yourself a disservice. I don't think that's the case at all.
Well, nevertheless, it looked like a lot of fun and fair play to them. See all the good stuff that you can get if you just do a podcast. When I pitched up at Fowler's horrible flat back in 2013, never in a million years did I think I'd be getting to have the opportunities that I've had now. And I'm sure when Ross and John started the Falkirk Daft podcast, they would never have foreseen they would get to operate a ribbon and a giant pair of scissors.
Now, I haven't seen the video. Is it a case of giant scissors and a ribbon?
I don't know, man. I had a lot of tears in my eyes at that point. I'll need to go back and watch it a second time just to be 100% sure.
I'm going to watch it after this. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Now, before we begin this week's show, we have to issue a correction and clarification from last week. When I opened up last week's episode, I compared myself and Shaughan to Ron and Don Harris in a futile attempt to pop the boys and work the marks. But a number of people got in touch with me to tell me that Ron and Don Harris are in fact Nazis, and both of them have pretty visible SS tattoos on their arms. Now, this information is widely available on their Wikipedia page. I just did not scroll far enough down to read it. Now, the sentiment was palpable in comparing ourselves to two dumpling wrestlers from the 90s and early 2000s, but I think it's important, Shaughan, that you and I distance ourselves from both Ron and Don Harris and the Nazis and fascism at large. We can't really be clearer than that.
It is not something I want to get involved in. But what I would say is, sometimes we'll have to kind of rush the research for this show. I mean, this one, for example, we're recording on the Tuesday. Mm-hmm. It can be a bit of a rush. So, listen, no blame to you for missing the fact that they are two people who love Adolf Hitler.
Now, it's important to say, though, that when they were in the DOA, Disciples of Apocalypse, the stable they were part of in around 1997, 1998, they were a biker gang. And I think that biker gangs, this isn't applicable to every biker gang, but I'm going to assume a lot of them are quite like anti-government, like quite fascist, let's be honest. And some of them may or may not have tattoos that glorify the Nazi Party. Now, people who are familiar with wrestling, and I know there's quite a fair degree overlap in that Venn diagram of Terrace podcast listeners and people who enjoy wrestling, they'll have heard of the term kayfabe, where if you remain in character, and I think that's perhaps what the SS tattoos were, was Ron Don Harris being in character as Skull and 8-Ball from DOA. That's a very charitable reading of the situation. It's a very charitable reading.
I mean, I would struggle to comment. I've never been in a biker gang. I can't even go a push bike. So the chances of me being in a biker gang are slim, but I will take your word for it.
It reminded me of, I don't know if this is pressing any buzzers inside your skull, Shaughan, a bit of controversy from late 2020. There was a Sky History show called The Chop, Britain's Top Woodworker. Just pressing any buttons?
No,
right?
not yet.
I think the show was supposed to last for 10 episodes, but it was pulled after just one. Right?
I am. Yes, I am. Yes.
One of the contestants had the number 88 tattooed on his face, as well as several other Nazi and white power slogans, which is something that was missed by the production company up until the first episode had gone out.
Yes, I do remember that now, actually. Extraordinary. What a waste of a TV show.
Yeah, now, in his defence, the contestant, his name's Darren Lumsden, he said, "I have my daughter on the back of my head and my son on my cheek. When some people first meet me, they are a bit shocked, admittedly, but they soon warm to me after a few minutes." I think it's important to say, if it can happen to the Sky History Channel, it can happen to anyone.
I do think 88 tattooed on your face is a red flag, and Sky should have picked up on that.
If it can happen to the Sky History Channel, it can happen to anyone. And I think that I speak on behalf of both myself and Shaughan, who we consider the matter closed.
Here.
Now, we are going to properly start this podcast by taking a look at the Championship. We'll have a look at the big game between Raith Rovers and Partick Thistle. Now, I can hear the people at home saying, "Oi, Telfer, you talked about Thistle last week. What's wrong with you?" Well, we originally intended to discuss Greenock Morton's 2-2 draw with Airdrieonians, but because, as you mentioned, Shaughan, we're recording this on a Tuesday evening, Morton are quite literally taking on Hamilton Accies right this very second. So we're going to have to focus on something else. And that's a damn shame, because there was plenty to discuss from that match.
I was looking forward to it. I must admit, I totally missed the fact that they were playing in midweek, much like you missed those Nazis.
Listen, if it can happen to two guys who are looking at fixtures to record a podcast about, it can happen to anyone. Well, it's a shame, because it would have been a lot of fun to discuss Ben Wilson's opening goal, which I think it was whacked off Jack's bared face to play him in. In terms of unfortunate assists, that is perhaps one of the more unluckiest we've seen so far this season.
I think, excuse me, I think it came off Jack Baird's face, but also at some point Ben Wilson's throat.
Yes.
To kind of set himself up. It was just a very, very unusual goal. Very funny though.
Yes, it's almost like the poor man's equivalent of Dennis Bergkamp against Leicester, with Jack Baird being the equivalent of Nikos Dabizas getting turned inside out.
And in more pain.
Yes, in a lot more pain. So when Ben Wilson was wheeling away to celebrate them, Jack Baird was getting a magic sponge applied to his throat. Nevertheless, we're going to talk about Raith's 3-0 win over Partick Thistle. 2 first-half goals from Finlay Pollock and a Dylan Easton penalty gave Rovers a deserved win. Thistle still in 4th place, despite taking just 1 point from the last 4 matches. But Rovers are creeping up on them. They're now in 5th place, 6 points behind them, and crucially with 2 games in hand. This match as well, Shaughan, we have to say, it proved to be Kris Doolan's final game in charge of the club. He left Thistle on Tuesday morning. Brian Graham and Mark Wilson, they're going to be managing the team on an interim basis. And I suppose we'll start just by talking about Doolan's departure, because I think there's a sense of relief from the Thistle supporters. I think that it wasn't working. It hadn't been working for a couple of months now. But I really don't think anyone's happy about this.
No, you know something, you're absolutely right. And I think there is Probably because we don't watch Thistle for 90 minutes each week. But I think my belief was that they would kind of stumble into fourth, probably lose in the quarterfinals of the playoffs. Doolan would then be jettisoned at that point, and then you start afresh in the summer. However, see on like Saturday's performance was so poor.
Yeah.
I mean, I said afterwards
that was palpable watching the highlights, Shaughan, just how bad Thistle looked.
Yeah, I mean, to go to let's face it, Raith are very much a mediocre championship side. So to go there, a team that is ultimately looking to get promoted to the Premiership, to register not a single shot at goal, and it wasn't just the performance. I don't know how to describe it. It was like a feeling, I suppose. So see when maybe a pass went awry or something happened. The amount of times that maybe 2 or 3 Partick Thistle players would start arguing amongst themselves, and maybe that wouldn't have happened if Brian Graham had been playing, for example. I don't know, but it's just you very much got the impression, probably from about kind of 15 minutes onwards, that was a bad performance and just a team and a squad that isn't particularly happy. And I don't know if replacing Doolan fixes that. Maybe might make it better. I do think it's a good starting 11, but not necessarily a great squad. Certainly, if you look at the bench that they had on Saturday, there wasn't too many options there that could come off it and change the game. But it very much felt like a team that is going nowhere under Doolan. So it was understandable and not that unexpected, actually, that he was kind of shown the door.
They looked absolutely hapless on Saturday. You were there, so it'll be really interesting to dig deep into your brain and get more thoughts on it. But going by the highlights, and I've got to say that the highlights produced by Raith Rovers are different class. The quality of the picture, the different camera angles as well, and I suppose that having the camera about sort of in line with the opposition penalty box, you got a really good view of just how hapless they were. And I don't like singling out players. I think Dan O'Reilly particularly struggled here. He was bad, but then it was summed up by the concession of that penalty from Stuart Bannigan on, I think it was Jamie Gullen that he's got in a pushing match with. Yeah. It just looked like your head's not in the game. To concede a penalty like that, your head's not in the game. Having just been cautioned to shove him over, a two-handed shove. I mean, I don't think it was with particularly any great force. I think Gullen could have stayed in his feet, but that is besides the point. And I think that, Doolan, if you say the squad hasn't been put together, I suppose this showed how bad that's been. The fact that Brian Graham was missing, he had picked up 2 yellow cards in the previous match against Falkirk, so he was suspended. I think it was Terry Abladi that played up front in his place. Didn't look like he had a particularly good game. And it's guys like Kyle Turner, who on paper you thought he'd be a smashing signing. Didn't look very good. Kabayo Megwa, say he was one of the most sought after fullbacks, who'd available any team, I think outside the top flight would have been delighted to have him. He hasn't really kicked on. And it just feels like a combination of Doolan not really being able to drag this team out of the tailspin. But I think some of the players might need to take responsibility as well. Senior experienced players who have all proven themselves to be good players for Partick Thistle in the past. Everyone just seems to be dragged into a bit of a funk at the moment.
Yeah, you're right, because I thought their summer window was pretty good. But actually, you're right. So you mentioned Megwa, you've mentioned Turner. Those signings right now haven't worked out for whatever reason. I did think it was quite interesting. So is it Josh Reid? I think that came in was it maybe Thursday or Friday?
Yeah,
he came in on loan from Ross County. Now he came on, here's a left back. So you're right, Daniel O'Reilly, who is a centre half. I think a good centre half, but he's certainly not a left back. But he started this game at left back and kind of moved inwards. And Josh Reid came on at half time and went to left back. So suddenly they had somebody who actually can play left back. But see, at full time, bearing in mind this is, I would imagine, Partick Thistle's worst performance of the season.
Yeah.
I can't imagine if they've played poorer than this. Albeit, I think Raith made them poor, certainly contributed to it. But the player So yes, Kris Doolan obviously came out and done an interview afterwards. But the player that came out afterwards was Josh Reid. And it was like, I'm not entirely sure if that's why is it him? Like, he's been at a club 5 minutes. Why is maybe a more experienced player not coming out and kind of fronting up? And I'd appreciate you apologising or whatever, is like, who cares? But I thought that was odd and maybe summed up their day.
The goals that they lost, Shaughan, I mean, Finlay Pollock got the first 2 goals, and I suppose that we can look at the first goal was a bit of I'm difficult. I had to watch it back a couple of times in the highlights to actually make sense of what happened. I think it's a Lewis Stevenson ball played across the face of goal to no one really, but Kyle Turner seems to. I'm not sure what he's trying to do. If he miscontrols it or he's trying to pass it to O'Reilly. Doesn't work either way, and Finlay Pollock's able to nip in. Times his run very well, and he's very switched on to what's going on around him. But it just seemed that set the tone really for just quite, well, I'm going to use the word again, just quite a hapless showing.
I wasn't sure. It was such a strange thing. I wasn't sure if it just deflected off him. But you're right. It kind of feels like he is making a pass. I just can't quite figure out who he's making the pass to, and obviously, ultimately, it went through maybe 2 or 3 Partick Thistle players, and you're right, a good finish from Pollock, but you're right, a weird passage of play. And
that second goal as well, the goal comes, it's a second phase of a free kick, the ball gets played back out to Dylan Easton, whips in the ball, and there's Pollock again, just seems to, going by those highlights, he seems to come alive. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but he seems to come alive inside the penalty box. He's got really good burst of speed over short distances, and he's right in there, comes over O'Reilly's blind side and pokes into the net. And I think that there's O'Reilly like half-heartedly complaining for an offside, and it's like, I'm sorry mate, he was about 3 or 4 yards the other side of you. You're never getting that shout. I mean, what have you made of Pollock since he signed for the Rovers?
I mean, bear in mind, on Saturday morning, I would have been quite happy if Pollock had been recalled to play in the Lowland League for Hearts B. But it's interesting listening to, like, it hasn't been great. It hasn't been great for Raith. He's generally been played out wide. He's very, very quick. So I think it makes sense. He is a wide player that you play wide because he's quick. I don't know if that's where he wants to play or if that's where he feels most comfortable. But it was interesting listening to Barry Robson after the game, because I mean, obviously Partick Thistle didn't have Brian Graham. However, Raith haven't had Lewis Vaughan for 5 months. Jack Hamilton is unavailable. They have brought in Gullen, but they played Gullen and Pollock as a front two. So Pollock wasn't wide; he was central. And Robson was talking about the fact that in his time, he's seen Pollock. He's tried to play him up front, but he kind of felt like his kind of runs and his movement wasn't what you would want, I suppose, as a striker. And that makes sense because he's predominantly played out wide. But Robson is saying that he's kind of drummed it into him, essentially, and tried to coach him kind of day to day in terms of what he needs to do and how he needs to do it. So that was quite interesting. Listen, maybe it's just a thing. Maybe it was just a fluke, I suppose. But it was quite interesting. That sounds like that Robson is very much working with Pollock on a kind of day-to-day basis on improving him, I suppose, which is what you want from a manager. Yeah, definitely.
And something I was well noticed about Rovers, and I'm not sure if this is just because that Partick Thistle were really off the pace here, they just seem to be really, really aggressive and really on top of them. I think there was a moment in the first half as well where Bannigan takes probably like a half a second too long on the ball. Gullen's right on top of him, and the ball breaks to Scott Brown and has a shot, and it comes off the post. Was that the case? I mean, was that a good example? Was that a good encapsulation of the game at large?
Totally. And funnily enough, I didn't think Raith were that good on the ball. Like, see, other than the 3 goals, it wasn't as if they were kind of peppering David Mitchell with shots. They weren't creating an abundance of chances. They were decent on the ball. But I thought off the ball, that's where I thought they really came into their own. And Pollock and Gullen especially kind of leading from the front. But as soon as Thistle were in possession, they had a kind of Raith Rovers player pressing them. And that's what was the most impressive aspect from a Rovers perspective in this game. And I think I am tentatively encouraged about the fact that maybe, I mean, let's face it, it's a low bar. I've maybe only enjoyed about 5 games this season, but 3 of them have come under Robson. So away at Falkirk in the Scottish Cup, away at Hamilton, whatever it was a couple of weeks ago, and certainly Saturday. So there's 3 of the best performances from Rovers this season have come under Robson. So that's encouraging.
That's good. That's good. And what you do, Shaughan, I want you to sum up the bit of the passage of play that led to Dylan Easton's penalty. I want to start by saying David Mitchell lets a back pass roll under his feet. Tell us what happens next.
Right. So David, it's such a soft corner to give away. And it's one of those, it's such a silly thing. I turned round at that point and goes, Rovers will score for this corner because it's such a ridiculous corner to get. Now, I don't know what happens from there on in between in terms of, bear in mind, nothing unusual seems to occur. In terms of a team defending a corner and a team attacking a corner, it looks like Jamie Gullen laughs. It looked like Jamie Gullen was maybe taking the piss out the fact that David Mitchell had allowed that to go out for a corner. Maybe, right? But certainly, Stuart Bannigan takes real umbrage at it, and he kind of puts his chest into him. There's a wee bit of a coming together, and then the referee, as normally happens at corner kicks, essentially tells him to cut it out. I think Jamie Gullen's like, well, I've not really done anything. Stuart Bannigan goes on and on and on and on and on, and then he gets booked. And then because it's in front of Raith Rovers fans, I was looking at it and I was like, he's absolutely kind of lost the run of himself here, and we still have to take a corner, and he is still shaping up to defend against Jamie Gullen, but he's lost his mind.
Yeah.
He's absolutely lost the run of himself. And at that point, I actually went, they actually need to take Bannigan off because he's going to give away a penalty here. and he did. But it's such a weird shove. It's not a shove that you normally see in football. It's like if a toddler got a watering can took off them by another child at a nursery, and then they just have a kind of a petulant shove. It's just a weird situation. And the referee, I think it's Lloyd Wilson was the referee. He's right there. He's right next to him.
Yeah.
And he's, I think he knows that Bannigan has lost the run of himself, so he's not looking at anything else. He's just looking at Bannigan and Gullen. And you're right. I don't know if Gullen had to go down, but it was a definite penalty.
Yeah.
That was a stick-on penalty. And bear in mind, he was already on a booking. It could have been a second yellow. However, it was good that it wasn't a second yellow, because immediately, as soon as Easton scores a penalty, terrible penalty, terrible, a rubbish goal, he was subbed off. So you had that whole kind of, so embarrassing.
Yeah, that's for a player of Bannigan's experience. Find it staggering that you can lose the run of yourself like that, but perhaps that's what's going on at Thistle in a microcosm. We mentioned that Brian Graham will be taking charge of the team, and that's him effectively got 3 jobs at the same club: men's manager, women's manager, player and captain. I don't know if that includes any additional responsibilities. He's taking the team on with Mark Wilson. I'm going to assume that's former Celtic and Dundee United fullback Mark Wilson.
I presume so, but I'm not 100% certain.
You can imagine it's a fairly common name. It's not like Didier Ragat. You say who Didier Ragat is, you know who he is. Mark Wilson, you've got to clarify. Is that the same one that was at Celtic and Dundee United?
It's probably him.
If it's, I don't know how long they're going to be taking charge of the club for. I don't think it's inconceivable. You could see Brian Graham actually taking charge of the club on a permanent basis. But if it's not Graham, who do you think it could be?
I suspect it will be. I did wonder if it would be. Oh, his name's just totally escaped from my head. The former Motherwell manager.
Oh my God! You've seen Stuart Kettlewell
until today. Until today, when he's suggesting he could be kicking people in the stand. So I'm not entirely sure it will be him. No, I suspect it will be. I suspect it will be Graham. It just feels like a kind of natural. It's felt like this has been coming for a while, so I'd probably be surprised if it wasn't Brian Graham.
I don't know, man. I think if you've got someone like Ian Murray who's available, because that seems like a pretty good job for him to take. He's managed well at that level in the past, but whether or not, it just feels like that. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it just feels like an interesting dynamic in Thistle there with a certain profile of player. There's a lot of experienced guys there, and I think a lot of guys who are perhaps used to getting their own way and so on. So it'll be interesting to see whoever comes in how that is dealt with.
It does feel like a club who want to save money. So I suppose if Brian Graham is a player manager, then it saves them a wage. So I do think that might be a factor as well.
Speaking of departures, Shaughan, Andy Barrowman, Raith Rovers CEO, he stepped down from his role on it was the evening before the game, Thursday. Thursday evening, I think it was announced on the Friday. But it really seemed to come out of nowhere, and the statement on the club website was quite curt. Barrowman himself responded on Twitter on Monday night, saying, on Thursday, February 13th, I was informed that my employment with the club had been terminated with immediate effect due to the role of chief executive being made redundant. To say that he accuses it came as a surprise is an understatement. While I obviously don't agree with the decision, I respect the club's wishes and remain incredibly proud of the progress we made during my time there. What have you made of that?
In terms of his time at the club, I think the club is in a far better place now than what it was when he joined. And if he's the CEO, and I suppose ultimately everything kind of reports to him in one way or another, then he has to take credit for that.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose I don't have an issue. I'm not worried about Andrew Barrowman going. I suppose what I am concerned about is why he's departed. So I don't think that I think he does rub people up the kind of wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard a lot of stories about people not necessarily being overly enamoured at how he works. So if it's a case of egos and button heads and him falling out with Dean McKenzie or Colin Smart, for example, on the board, then fine. I suppose the concern would be if he's supposed to be looking after budgets, for example. If he's let that get away from him, then that would be a concern. But as it stands, don't really know.
That's fair enough. I don't have anything to add. I wasn't sure what he does. I suppose chief executive, you're in charge of it's a fairly senior position, but if that's done away with, then I wonder who the ultimate responsibility and the day-to-day running of the club falls to.
So that's interesting, because I think ultimately, so Dean McKenzie is the driving force for everything that happens off the park. And I think John Potter, as well as, at this moment in time, Barry Robson, as a manager, is kind of responsible for everything that happens on the park. So I think Barrowman is more a kind of public face. He's kind of front and centre, but he's no longer there. So it'll be interesting, because Dean McKenzie has no interest whatsoever. Have you ever seen Dean McKenzie do an interview? Do you know what he looks like? I certainly don't. That's not something he wants to do. So it'll be interesting to see if they bring somebody else in to essentially give an update every 2 or 3 months, which I kind of felt at times that's what Barrowman was doing. He's not a money man. He's just the mouthpiece of Dean McKenzie and the rest of the board. So I don't think his position was a necessity, but considering how reticent Dean McKenzie is to get interviewed, I don't know how that plays out going forward. But no, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing or a good thing, to be honest.
So we're not going to see Dean McKenzie in a parody recreation of Love Actually then?
I wouldn't imagine so, no.
And that's a shame. That would have been a lot of fun. Now, up next, Shaughan, Raith Rovers are playing Hamilton Academical. Accies, they did beat Queen's Park at the weekend. I think that's perhaps the most obvious result that was ever going to happen after Queen's Park beat Rangers in the Scottish Cup. So we don't know if they're going to bounce back against Morton, but you were very comfortable against them last time you played them.
Yes, I suspect that Raith will win this one. I am confident about it. We'll see how that goes.
And Partick Thistle versus Airdrieonians. Airdrie are a really good run of form at the moment. A good two draw with Greenock Morton on Saturday. I think they'd won their previous 3 matches. So am I right in saying?
Yep. I still think Thistle will have too much fun. They're just a better team than Airdrie. Albeit Airdrie are on a decent run. Thistle are fourth for a reason. I still expect a home win.
Fair play. We'll move from the Championship into League One, and we'll move from I've got Inverclyde to Clackmannanshire. You can tell these notes were written up prior to the change of match. I wasn't in my skull quick enough to think, where the Partick Thistle play? Yes, we're going to move from Glasgow to Clackmannanshire, and we're going to discuss 2 sides who have been in poor form of lately, and this is Alloa Athletic and Kelty Hearts. They played each other at Rex, and the Wasps won by 2-0. The contest was settled in the first half through an own goal from Callum Flatman and a well-taken sort of strike at an angle from Stephen Buchanan. That was Alloa's first win in 5 matches. They've climbed up to 4th place. Kelty, though, are in really bad form at the moment. They've dropped to 6th. They've just taken 2 points from the last 5 games, only scored 1 goal in that period, and that is back-to-back defeats under the new manager, Charlie Mulgrew. Shaughan, what are your immediate thoughts on Alloa Athletic 2, Kelty Hearts 0?
It looked very, very straightforward. And I know Andy Graham was, I can't remember the word that Andy Graham was presented with that he disagreed with. Ultimately was asked if it was straightforward, and he said, well, I don't think so, because we had to work very, very hard. But I mean, this was a very straightforward 2-0 win. The fact that kind of Alloa have been in such poor form, but are still 4th in the table. But Kelty, they look at very much a kind of diminished outfit, I suppose, since Tidser left. I do think the fact that Tidser was put on gardening leave had some kind of impact on them. And I suppose they've lost a manager. And I know he wasn't playing latterly, but ultimately he was a decent option potentially off the bench. So a good midfielder as well. And they've lost Scott Williamson. Yeah. So it looks like they've lost a kind of leader, a good player, and arguably their best forward. And Charlie Mulgrew is obviously new to the role, but you can tell that he's still kind of struggling to come to terms with how he gets around it, I suppose. Yeah,
I mean, I was looking, I suppose, that Michael Tidser, I thought, having seen him earlier in the season when I think it was opening day, sorry, not the opening day, the second game of the season, I think it was, when Stennis Muir took them on, I thought that he was just comfortably the best player in the park. I've used the term before, but he plays like he's got a force field around him. And I just think that for having sort of pretty young guys, I don't think that I can't quite remember who it was that was playing in central midfield around him, but guys who weren't the most experienced players, but having someone like that around him just made everyone better. And I just don't think that, for instance, like Blaine McClure that's coming on loan from Rangers youth team, I don't necessarily think he is going to be that player. Liam Brown hasn't kicked the ball for Kelty all season since he signed from East Kilbride. He was on the bench, but that's the first time he's actually made a matchday squad this campaign. So hopefully he can get up to speed and come in and offer them something, because he's a really good player, Liam Brown. I know he's had a pretty difficult time with injuries and perhaps making the wrong decisions career-wise and so on, but he's a really good player. And if he can get fit and get some kind of form, maybe he's the player that they can lean on. But I think it might look like perhaps the worst elements of Michael Tidser's Kelty team, with just lots of the ball, but just no penetration and no real thrust to them.
Totally. And the fact that Alloa were being led by a 17-year-old called, is it Josh Gentles?
Yes.
Up front, who actually looked okay, but that's not the name of a player I can necessarily get behind.
What, do you want, like Gordon Hardman? Is that the sort of name that you'd...
I just think Joshua Gentles is an unusual name.
Okay, so there you go, Josh Gentles. If you're listening, you need to go and change your name to how about Frank Ironside? There we go. That's a hard name.
I thought he'd done well, though. To be fair, I thought he'd done well. I thought he looked like a player, but just an unusual name.
Yeah, he did. And I think that just we'll come on and talk about Alloa shortly, but just to finish up on Kelty Hearts, I went back and watched the highlights from their game against Annan Athletic. That was Mulgrew's debut in charge, and from the impression I get from that game and this game, there just seems to be a lot of it's either a lot of bad luck. It seems to have been in some of the cases. I mean, the goals that they lost against Annan, one of them, it was like Rudy McAdams was kicking the ball out and it whacked off Tam Muir's chest and went in. Tam Muir just closed them down. You see these things happen all the time. I think that's not. What's the striker doing? You're just wasting energy. But no, that's what happens when it goes your favour. The goalkeeper can leather a clearance right off you and goes into the net. And similar to this one, Callum Flatman's own goal. Mm-hmm. Flatman's doing the right thing to try and get back and cover, but just diverts Gentle's cross into the net.
Yes, I agree. However, at the same time, for the second goal, I think it was Scott Mercer that got caught out. Just like a kind of long ball forward.
That was
so you're
bad.
right.
I think that was bad luck as well with that, because I think Mercer tries to take a touch or Mercer tries to get in front of Scott Honeyman. But as he's doing it, I think he gets a touch of the ball. And as he's running to try and clear it, I think Honeyman's been knocked off balance. I think Honeyman subsequently knocks Mercer off balance, and he's sort of staggering to try and clear the ball. But just unfortunately, because he's staggered, that just allows Buchanan, who's a bit quick off the mark, to run past the wearer and finish. Just bad luck. Just really bad luck.
I think you've been very kind. I thought it was poor defending. I thought it was a mixture of yes, bad luck, but B, poor defending for the second goal.
Well, certainly to go back to the Annan game, they lost 2 goals from set pieces. That's not fantastic. That's something that they need to work on. But yeah, the Kelty do look diminished. Now, it'll be interesting to see how Mulgrew gets on with them. I mean, I don't think we've really spoken about Mulgrew since he took charge of the club. What's his coaching experience? He was coaching Hamilton's under-18s, am I right in saying?
He was in charge of Hamilton's under-18s team, who were doing very poorly. Now, right. I appreciate there's only so much you can do with an under-18 team, but I was surprised that Kelty went for him, put it that way.
I suppose that Kelty will say they have hired some pretty high-profile managers in the past, and it's generally been quite successful. Barry Ferguson, probably the terrific player back in his day, got them into the SPFL. Kevin Thompson, in his first season, got them into League One. Michael Tidser did very well for them, obviously not as high profile as the previous two. But then Mulgrew, there's perhaps think that Lightning can strike a third or fourth time with this.
Potentially, listen, it might be great. I just, and you're right. The other managers that you've mentioned didn't necessarily have a kind of wealth of experience behind them, but
they had a lot of wealth of money behind them.
I don't know. I'm not enthused by the appointment, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and I saw the signs like Blaine McClure. I've gone by the highlights from this game. Didn't look like he had much of an impact. James Lyon, they've brought him in after he was let go by Partick Thistle. I think he did okay at East Fife last season, but someone who is handy enough when he's on the ball, but just a bit of a passenger without it. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. But certainly Mulgrew's one to keep an eye on. And I think that, there's still a long way to go and the league is still bunched up, but I think maybe Kelty, just because of the run of form they're on, because of the upheaval with Tidser, player-manager moving on, Mulgrew coming in, the loss of Scott Williamson, who returned to Queen's Park and was let go and signed for Clyde. I think I'm going to discount them from the top 4. I don't think they're going to finish in the top 4.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're kind of miles away from the kind of bottom of the table, but probably now feel a wee bit too far away from the top 4. So I think you're right. Interestingly, Mulgrew was very, very enthusiastic about McClure in his post-game summary, but it was also almost in total pitch darkness. Like he was interviewed on the park where there was no lights on, so you could barely see him. It was just like a voice.
The only bit that I really noticed from McClure, and I think that this is perhaps that he'll have a lot of learning to do to try and get up to speed. There's a bit, I think it's the score's 1-0. Tamil Ware, I think Tamil Ware's looking to pass the ball through him, and McClure dummies it. And it goes to, I don't think Jacob McIntyre's expecting it, and Alloa pounds, and Scott Honeyman has a shot, and it gets saved and put wide for a corner. Maybe I'm picking on Blaine McClure. That's maybe not fair because he's probably 18 or something. Maybe that was so Ware for trying to drill an ambitious vertical pass like that. Yeah, I'm going to take that back. I'm going to less about Blaine McClure. I apologise if you or your parents are listening. I'm going to maybe say that Ware should have just been a bit more thoughtful with what he was doing. Yeah, but yes, aye. Tamil Ware, be aware. That's what we're going to say. But I suppose for Alloa Athletic, it's I've noticed that they're unbeaten in their past 3 matches, and that coincides with Curtis Roberts coming back into the starting 11. And I think he really is a player the team have missed, because said it a lot when we talk about Alloa, is that he really does give them, and it's a word we use all the time, thrust. He is such a driving force in the middle of the park, and I think that pairing him and Stefan Skugel and the two, that double pivot there, that gives them a good balance. Like Stefan Skugel can pick the nice passes and so on, and give the midfield its ballast and move the ball around quickly. But Curtis Roberts is a real number 8, a box-to-box midfielder, can drive them forward, and I think that he sets up the second goal. It's his long ball that goes out to, long pass that goes out to Honeyman. And I think that a lot of the time when you're watching these highlights, anytime something good happened, it was usually at the instigation of Curtis Roberts. Yeah,
I mean, he's such a good player and makes such a difference in him and Skugel in that kind of edging room. Just improves Alloa. It would improve anybody in League One. But it's good in terms of, like, it feels like almost every manager, with the exception of Naismith, I suppose, but it feels like there's been a number of managers where they've been under pressure and everybody being happy with them at various points this season. But it feels like, I think you can maybe only go back a month, and I feel like Andy Graham was under a wee bit of pressure, but now it feels like that has been alleviated due to this run of form.
I think so. I was reading the comments from Alloa fans in Pie and Bovril, and I think they were like, it's not the most convincing win we're ever likely to have, but it's 3 points, and that's really important at the moment. And I was, when you say like I was worried about Clyde. Well, I'm not worried about Clyde, but you know what I mean. I was worried about Andy Graham, and just thinking that he might have lost a bit of support from the fans, and similar to, it's perhaps quite similar to Kris Doolan at Partick Thistle, beloved figure at the club, has been around there a long time, but that's only going to get you so far. Ultimately, if the club aren't winning, it's a lot of the time it's the manager that carries the can for that. And I was pleased to see them get the win there, because it does alleviate some of the pressure. It brings Alloa right back into the playoff discussion. And I think that there was perhaps, I think that there are still a number of teams that can do this. There's still a long way to go for this. But I was a bit worried that Alloa looked as though, similar to Montrose, where you go on a bad run and then you just become almost forgotten about. You slip out of contention. So I'm pleased that's not the case. And I hope that Graham can kick on and they can get a top 4 finish.
And I mean, let's face it, this Alloa team is a far inferior version than last season's. And there isn't a lot. I mean, other than recruiting better players, there isn't very much that Andy Graham can do about that. So, I suppose I've tempered my expectations of what I expect for Alloa this season, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose it's all just about loan players. I think that was it. You build a good functional side, and you try and bring in a bit of razzmatazz by signing loan players, and maybe Josh Gentles might do that. Maybe he can have the same kind of impact as a Taylor Stephen or an Ethan Sutherland. I'm surprised he's not had a game for St Mirren yet, Sutherland. I thought he'd be like right on the edge of the first stars. We callback joke there, Shaughan, to Sutherland. But you know what I mean? Guys that can come in and make a difference, and I hope that is the case. Just got to say right at the very end, I thought Scott Taggart was quite unlucky to have been sent off in this match.
I certainly thought his second booking was very soft, especially when he'd just been booked. Like his first booking seemed to be like about a minute before.
Yeah.
I thought he could have had a wee bit of leeway there.
Maybe the highlights didn't show it, but there was like 4 or 5 fouls in between that, because the first booking, yeah, I mean, he does the thing where you put your leg across and you thrust your hips and you knock the player off balance. I think that's a booking, particularly in that part of the pitch when the players quite clearly were going to run past you. But then the second one, it was very, very soft. It just seemed to be, it was a foul, but I don't think there was anything particularly illegal about it. So I was really surprised to see him sent off. But what I would say is that he didn't really seem to complain. He just seems to sort of take his medicine, then get off the pitch.
But also, it was like, what was it, like the 92nd minute? It's like, come on now, let's not be silly. No, I thought it was an unworthy second yellow.
But then right at the very end, they have the resultant free kick. They almost score. I think it's like Lewis Moore and then Liam McLeish have efforts cleared off the line, one after the other. And so that ties into what I'm saying about bad luck that Mulgrew's had. They score a goal, 93 minutes, anything can happen after that. But
I'm not so sure. Let's. If Charlie Mulgrew is still talking about bad luck in 3 or 4 weeks, and things are not going well.
Up next, it's the Battle of the Athletics. It is Annan versus Alloa at Gallowbank.
I fancy probably a draw.
Okay, and then Kelty Hearts versus Inverness Caledonian Thistle.
And Inverness will have too much for them away win.
Yeah, I think so. Bad start for Charlie Mulgrew. If that is the case, if they get a win, fantastic. But it's not been the most favourable run that he has that he's had. Yeah, I'd fancy Inverness Caledonian Thistle to win that one as well. Now, Shaughan, we will finish this podcast by talking about the biggest win in the SPFL from the weekend. We are going to be discussing the capital derby between Edinburgh City and the Spartans at Meadowbank, and it was a resounding victory for the citizens, 5-0. A brace each for Innes Lawson and Uzi C, as well as an injury time goal from Lewis MacArthur. And this make no mistake, this was an absolute rout and the high point of what has been an excellent season so far for Edinburgh. They've consolidated their place in the top 4, and they've drawn level in points with Elgin City in third, albeit Elgin have played 1 game less. The Spartans, meanwhile, are in 6th place. Now, Shaughan, I was at this match. Stennismuir's game against Inverness Caledonian Thistle was postponed. That was on Friday afternoon. It was called off because of a frozen pitch and impending bad weather. And when I was looking through the games for an alternative, I actually audibly gasped when I saw this was on. I went, fucking yes. And I bought my ticket for it there and then. And I'd like to think that I have become a lucky talisman for Edinburgh City. I've attended 3 league games with them. They've won it 2-0, 2-0 and 5-0. And, we've spoken about Edinburgh a lot on the podcast this season. So forgive me if I'm about to repeat points that I've already made. But it's so hard not to be excited about this team. And I'm going to say it, man. I think pound for pound, they're the best team in the SPFL at this moment.
So this looked like a very, very straightforward win for Edinburgh, but also felt like the kind of drama and the goals came in, I don't know, chunks. Does that make sense?
It was drama free, and it wasn't drama free at the same time, because Edinburgh quite early on, I think the first 2 goals came in about 5 minutes of one another, and then after that point, so after Edinburgh go 2-0 up, the Spartans see a lot of the ball but don't do anything with it, and it's balls just like pumped into the box. They're trying to get corners, they're trying to get free kicks, trying to get throw-ins. They really didn't have a lot of creativity, but nevertheless, they were seeing a lot of the ball, and they were putting Edinburgh under quite a fair bit of pressure, and Edinburgh had to withstand it. And there was a moment it was at the death, that way where the fans are shouting, blow your whistle, ref, blow your whistle, Ev, blow it. Mark Weir had to make a save. I think it's from Blair Henderson. Kieran Watson tried an overhead kick and missed it, and the ball comes to Henderson. And I've watched it back a couple of times in the highlights. Weir seems to just throw up an elbow. He throws up an arm, it deflects off him and goes out for a corner. And that was the only time where where Spartans looked really, really threatening. The second half started the same. I mean, the first 20 minutes in the second half were fucking abysmal because it was more of the same. But it was just quite niggly. There was a lot of niggly fouls that the Edinburgh were making to try and break up play. And then, out of nowhere, Malik Zaid, who was excellent again, takes the ball for a dribble across the face of goal, out towards the byline, almost dribbles it up his own arse, but then passes it to Uzi C, who just takes a touch and melts it into the top corner. And after that point, it's game over. The Innes Lawson gets his second, and then right to the death, Lewis MacArthur scores. So it ties back into a point where Michael McIndoe said, I think it was after the Clyde game, he said that this Edinburgh team need to find different ways to win a game of football. And I think that's exactly what we saw from them here. When they were on the ball, they were really, really good. And they played as we've come to expect from Edinburgh, just real front-footed, attacking, enterprising football. But when they weren't in possession, they stood up really well. And the Spartans were fucking terrible. Let's make no mistake there. But he'd have been delighted with that, because I think this is just the increasing maturity of his team in the face of come up against decent sides and being able to dig out results. And it's saying dig out results, that's what I mean, because they were really good here. But the 5-0 scoreline didn't flatter them, put it that way.
The highlights only lasted about 6.5 minutes or whatever it was, but what it looked like was that Innes Lawson, Uzi C and Malik Zaid was absolutely key to everything positive that Edinburgh did. So are they, because I think there was a concern that as soon as they lost Connor Young, that might be the end of them in terms of getting in the top four. I take it that isn't the case.
Well, they have played 4 games since Connor Young left the club. They lost that 4-1 match at East Fife, but that was, I think McIndoe put that down to a lack of maturity. Remember where I think it says Josh Grigor's out of position for a header and it goes in, and his post-match interview, McIndoe's like, we will train them. We will train these guys to be better players. So when that happens, when the situation happens, you're down 10 men, this won't happen again. He takes responsibility for it. Since that match though, however, so they played 4 games. They lost that match 4-1, but then they beat Stirling Albion 4-3. They beat Forfar Athletic 1-0. And then they beat the Spartans 5-0. So goals haven't been a problem. McIndoe said that the number 10s, they play with that sort of it's a 4-1-3-2 formation. Innovative, he calls it. And he's quite right, because you tend not to see a lot of teams play with that, not just with one anchor in midfield, it's normally with 2 at the expense of a striker. He said James Stokes, Innes Lawson, Uzi C all need to step up. And that's certainly what we saw here. Uzi C, for instance, spoken about him in this podcast like for years, because he's been around for a long time. A player that I've never particularly rated, I'll be honest. He was sensational here. He was absolutely brilliant. Guys like Kevin Waugh, Ayrton Sonker, couldn't get near him. Just he's strong, he's rangy, and a lot of the time it was find Uzi C. I think it was the second goal. I think it was the second goal. No, beg your pardon. It was the second goal. No, it wasn't. It was the first goal. Beg your pardon, it was the first goal. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up just because I want to analyse the goals. They were all the goals were really, really good here. But it's that second goal where he gets the ball in the middle of the park. Ayrton Sonker's trying to come behind him to win the header, but he can't because he's too strong. And he holds the ball and he waits for Zaid just to create the angle, pops it off to him, and then it's passed. Sorry, I beg your pardon. It was James Stokes that he popped off to, but then Stokes slips in Lawson. Blair Carswell comes out. Lawson's able to take it around him with his touch, curls it into an empty net. But that was C just as a good target man there. Just working with your strike partner, and then just the players around you knowing when to go. So when you see that, when that ball's played in to Uzi C, there's Stokes running off him, and there's Lawson running off him as well. The second goal, And this was my favourite goal of the match because because I was like almost like I was saying what I wanted to happen, and the players were doing it as they did. So there's a bit you see the highlights. So the bit where John Robertson gets the ball and he passes it to Zaid, and when Zaid's got the ball, Quinn Mitchell just takes off. Quinn Mitchell had an excellent game at left back. Quinn Mitchell takes off down the right. And I said, go on, slip him in. Zaid slips in Mitchell. Then Mitchell takes 2 touches, and you can see it. And I says, go on, put it in. And he does. And it's the ball across the face. It's a fabulous ball in. And all she does is need to do is touch it. I think I said, finish it as well. And so Edinburgh were listening to me, telling them what to do at the precise moments to score. But I thought that was just such a good goal. Just the Mitchell had a really good game, and I think that you could go through that the Edinburgh starting 11 and you can say something really positive about all 11 of them because they all had fantastic games, but that ball in was phenomenal, and everything he did was really good. Something about Edinburgh, I was looking at the back line. Eden Lynch is finishing the final game of his suspension after his red card at Edinburgh. He's going to find it difficult to come back into this team because Josh Grigor had a really good game. And you look at that Edinburgh back four, only Lewis MacArthur is the one who you describe as a proper defender. Like Mitchell has been playing in central midfield recently because of injuries. Now he's come back to left back. He is more of a natural left back, but he can operate in midfield because he's fundamentally a good footballer. Josh Grigor can play in central midfield. John Robertson has been playing right back all season for Edinburgh, but he made his name in football as a central midfielder. So you've got 3 out of the 4 guys that are just fundamentally very good football players and want to get in the ball. And that gives you so many different options. They can defend as well. We saw that, the backs against the wall stuff. But because they've got, there's out the outfield players, maybe out one who you say you probably don't want to be in the ball as much. That's Lewis MacArthur. But everyone else being so comfortable in possession, it must give you so many options of what you want to do. And we saw that at its best there on Saturday.
So it's funny because Michael McIndoe talks about the fact that there is kind of so much running in this team and they're so young and enthusiastic, and you can tell how much he enjoys managing them. And obviously we've mentioned Connor Young, the fact that we're concerned about where the goals were going to come from doesn't seem to be an issue. But you're right, in terms of clean sheets, I'd have to check, I haven't. But I'm not sure there's too many teams in the SPFL that have kept as many clean sheets as Edinburgh City.
I think it's only East Fife in that division that have kept a better clean sheet record.
So there you go. That's incredible. Considering, bear in mind where we thought Edinburgh were going to be in the summer. We're like, right, they'll be 10th. They'll probably get relegated, and yet they have as many clean sheets almost as anybody else in this division, and we're now thinking they will presumably finish in the top 4. Extraordinary.
There's a lot to unpack from what you said there. I'll start with the one where you said about the hard running and the energy in that team, and I think that was really summed up with the 4th goal. I think that Ayrton Sonker and Kevin Waugh have to take a wee bit of responsibility for it, because Sonker sells him with a short pass. Waugh needs to step out for it and miscontrols it a wee bit. But James Stokes, right on top of him, and then he's able to force him into the mistake, runs on to Lawson, and then Lawson plays that 1-2 with Uzi C, and it's a good finish past Blair Carswell. And it's just that sums up, you're 3-0 up, and it's just that anticipation of seeing this big centre-back coming into a part of the pitch where he doesn't want to be, and just being right on top of him. What happens a lot of the time is that Waugh brings it under control and gives it to James Cragen or passes it back to his goalkeeper, so on. But it's like kind of similar to what we talked about with Tam Muir scoring against Kelty Hearts last weekend. It's just that being that anticipation, just if you can force mistakes, that's what it can lead to. And it paid dividends. And then jumping on to the next point there about where they're going to finish. On the way in, I was in the ground about 2:30 because I wanted to get a seat in the back row, because I think Meadowbank isn't a fantastic... as good as this team are, they deserve to be playing somewhere better than Meadowbank. But if you're not in there early enough, you are going to be sitting where, the ball goes over to the far side. It might as well be in fucking Belgrade, because you're not going to see it. So I was in early, and Eden Lynch was sitting in the stand. So I got, like, Eden Lynch is a hero to me because of what he achieved at Stennismuir last season. But I was speaking to him, and just we were talking about Edinburgh in general, and just he was so complimentary about Michael McIndoe and the attention to detail that he's built, and the team spirit and the sense of camaraderie that he's built, which is palpable. And he said one of the things that they've really lead into is the fact that everyone had written them off. And I had to say, I was one of those people. Uh-huh. I was one of those people that had written them off at the start of the season. And that how much that must feed into where everyone's written you off and you can go there and completely punch above expectations. That's why I think that from expectations, the money these guys are on, that's why I think they are the best side pound for pound in the SPFL at the moment. Also got talking to Charlie Mulgrew at the match, friend of the family, sometimes appears in this podcast. And we were talking about just the season, how it's going. And obviously he's having the time of his life. And we were talking about how more experienced players might not want to work under Michael McIndoe because he's so intense and the demands that he puts on his players. But he was saying they'd gone in for a centre-back, a pretty experienced, well-known centre-back whose name will be very familiar to listeners on this podcast. The deal couldn't quite be worked out. I think it was because of the player's work commitments. But the player had said, I'd love to play for that mad bastard. And I think that there'll be like a lot of these managers. I think that you will either think this guy's a fucking idiot and I can't even bothered playing for him, or you'll be like, I'm going to run through brick walls for this guy. And I think that this team of players that McIndoe's put together, they are very much in that run through brick walls for them. And if they can get promoted, and it's still, it's very conceivable. Depends who they take on in the playoffs. Depends who finishes 9th or whatever. But you could see them coming up, and you could see them having providing they can stay together, or McIndoe can recruit a higher caliber of player. But you could see them like having an impact next season. I don't want to get too carried away because I'm very much aware that I am very McIndoe pilled. I believe in this Edinburgh City project. I believe in what he's doing. But you could see them kicking on, and you'd be wondering it's only a matter of time. We talked about other players moving elsewhere, but like somebody coming in for him. That's what I think where they are at the moment.
I am presuming that you watched Michael McIndoe's kind of interview afterwards.
Of course I did.
Very white. It looked like he was getting interviewed in the afterlife. It was very unusual. But I honestly got goosebumps when he said, I don't know if you'll remember it, but he was talking about the fact that we're a really kind of good run of form at this moment in time, and he said, "Who knows how long
the football gods
this run will last?" He goes, "We'll leave that to the football gods." Honestly, goosebumps, absolute goosebumps. What an incredible man!
It's. I watched his interview, and so I went back right to watch the very first interview he recorded for them. So this is from early November 2023, and this is in the aftermath of it was a 5-1 home defeat to Montrose. Remember, says congratulations to Montrose today,
yeah.
But I remember at the time thinking, this guy's a fucking wanker, the stuff he's coming out with. But he was really critical of the players. Like, he was questioning their heart and their fitness and their mentality. And he was really demanding. He said, what we demand of them is excellence. He's got that now. Yeah. That's the thing, right. That he has got excellence. Right. The players that were there last season in that Edinburgh squad, I think the only 2 players that were there, Sam Gormley, who left the club to go to Bonnyrigg but came back to them, and Quinn Mitchell. I think they're the only 2 players from. I think even Mitchell might have come from the under-20s. I don't know. He wasn't in that squad. But 2 players from last season. Now McIndoe does have his own players in, and he is demanding excellence, and he's getting it from them. Like, so it's just incredible to have watched back that interview thinking, fuck me, man, this guy's an absolute rocket. I mean, I do still think he's an absolute rocket. That hasn't changed. But it's the fact that that's what you demand. That's how seriously you take your football, and that you can take a club that are down on their luck and really be able to do incredible things with them. I mean, even the second half of last season, when Edinburgh had the points deduction, a lot of the players departed. Fucking Alloa was playing in central midfield for them. I mean, the fact then, Edinburgh were never really well beaten. I need to go back and check, but they were never really well beaten. It was always by the odd goal. And I think that's just perhaps because of the lack of quality, lack of fitness, the fact that the squad was thrown together. But whereas this team now, he's finally got a squad of players that are his, all buying into it. We demand excellence, and that's exactly what he's got. So if you're an Edinburgh fan, and I've seen the stuff that Charlie Mulgrew's put on Pie and Bovril, this is his favourite time supporting the club. I don't fucking blame him. I do not blame him, because this is not a fan, but I was, like I say, when I got the chance to go and see them on Saturday, I was excited. I was excited on the drive through to Edinburgh. I couldn't wait after the game to get back in the house to go and Pie and Bovril and read what folk were saying about the match and post my own thoughts. I couldn't wait to jump in this podcast with you to talk about them, just because they were so good and such an effervescent performance. And having seen them now 4 times, once in the SPFL Trust Trophy and 3 times in the league, I think they're such a good side. Such a good side. And you wonder, when I was talking to Eden Lynch, he was talking about East Fife, and he compared East Fife to Stennismuir last season, where they've got players there, they said, like Gregor Buchanan, Ross Meakin, guys who have just been around a wee bit and got the know-how to get you out of sticky situations. If the game's going against you, these guys have got the spirit to just ride out difficult passages of play. And Edinburgh don't quite have that just yet. It's not inconceivable to think that, they're playing Elgin City at the weekend. Not inconceivable to think that they go up to Borough Briggs and lose 2-0. Because the team are inconsistent. And that's something McIndoe touched on in the post-match interview when he compared them to the Spartans and East Fife and Peterhead, teams that have been together largely for 2 or 3 years. And if he can keep this group of players together and add in the elements of quality, it'll be really interesting to see what he's able to achieve with them. So it was great to be there. It was great to speak to Eden Lynch. I was disappointed I didn't see Darren Mitchell, unfortunately. I hope to catch up with him soon. But just great afternoon out from an Edinburgh City's perspective anyway.
I would love to get Michael McIndoe on A View from the Terrace. Oh,
Mr. McIndoe, if you are listening, please come on. This will be the most softball interview you have sat down to since that one where it was like, we've got an exclusive interview with the manager on the YouTube channel, and you could tell all the questions he had said, ask me this, ask me this, ask me this. I'd love to sit down with him for an hour and just like talk to him. Just talk to him about him in general, his background, his past, and his what he wants to achieve in football. Because who knows? I mean, we're seeing him when he was at Gretna 2008. I think that they had been on an absolutely horrendous run of form till he came in and was able to actually get a tune out of some pretty limited players. And what he's doing at Edinburgh City, it's a shame that I think the manager of the year, when it comes to lower leagues, it tends to go to the manager who wins the division. I don't think that tells the full story. You've seen the top flight sometimes, somebody who gets manager of the year. That you've got to, like Steve Clark taking Kilmarnock to third. That's manager of the year. Most of the time it'll go to Brendan Rodgers. So on. In the lower leagues, it's whoever wins the division. It'd be a damn shame if he doesn't get it, regardless of where Edinburgh finish. I do genuinely mean that. If Edinburgh could lose their next couple of games, finish in 5th or 6th place, I still think he deserves it for what he's able to achieve with this team. But very, very impressive stuff. And it's a season that goes on for strength to strength. And I think this is the high point of their season so far.
No, agreed. Brilliant to get to hear you talk about it in terms of Ali Moncrief, in terms of him kind of going on Pie and Bovril and talking about the fact that this is kind of as good as it gets. Yeah. I suppose. Brilliant to kind of listen to.
But I suppose that we've spent a lot of time talking about them, and I was thinking, is there anything really to say about the Spartans? They were fucking wank. I'm really sorry. As a performance, this
feels like an experienced and probably well paid squad. Is there anything about Dougie Samuels that might? Is he under pressure? I don't know. I don't think he is.
I don't think so.
Do you think he is?
No, I don't think so. I think we said this when we did our manager tier list. I think that perhaps of any manager in the SPFL, he has got the most credit in the bank. And I see even more credit in the bank than the likes of John McGlynn or Gary Naismith or Michael McIndoe himself. I think that he has been at the Spartans that long and has achieved some fantastic stuff, not just on the pitch, but perhaps off the pitch as well, in terms of growing the club and all the community work. And I think it would have to be an absolutely horrendous run of form. Even if they dropped it back into the Lowland League, which I don't see happening. I think Forfar, I think we all know Forfar are probably going to finish bottom. But it would have to take something horrendous for him to go. I don't think the chairman, Craig Graham, I don't think he's minded to do that. But a really poor performance. I mean, as we mentioned there, you go watch the highlights, all their best chances came from set pieces. Corner kicks, free kicks, or a Cammy Russell throw-in. They didn't create anything in open play. Blair Henderson had one of those games. I'd seen him the previous week as well at Stirling Albion, and he did have a good game. But this is one of those games where he just doesn't do it. Nothing comes off for him. MacArthur and Grigor had it pretty easy going with him. Cragen tried his best to get going in the middle of the park, but there was nothing going on around him. And there was weird substitutions. The time to change things, they were having a lot of the ball and putting Edinburgh under pressure. Like, see about 55 minutes. That would have been the time to bring changes on. Get Hamish Ritchie on. Get Mark Stowe on. Let's see, get Danny Denham on. Let's see if we can make something happen, like something out wide. Try something a bit different. But he only made the changes after going 3-0 down. And by that point, the game's gone.
It's too late. And
Edinburgh at that point are just so confident. Like, I think that they could have brought Arjen Robben on to go up against Quinn Mitchell, and Quinn Mitchell would be like, no bother, I can take him on, no bother, because that's just how confident they were. But the other stuff as well, the defending was really poor for the goals. Like Kieran Watson caught out of position for both goals. Both goals came down Edinburgh's left on the Spartans' right. Kevin Waugh seems to reserve his poorest performances for Meadowbank. He was sent off the last time back in October. Sonker, miles off it. He's nowhere near Lewis MacArthur for that fifth goal. And I would say in their defence is that they've lost 2 games against the better teams in the division. So that's East Fife and Edinburgh. But they do have a favourable run coming up, and a lot of the games are at home, and they're certainly a lot better at Ainsley Park than they are on the road. It's not inconceivable that they could still be a shout for the top 4. But I think that depends on both Edinburgh and Stirling Albion having really poor runs, which isn't inconceivable, particularly in Stirling Albion's case.
I think Dougie Samuel will get away with it this season. I think this is by League 2 standards, a kind of reasonably, by Spartan standards, I suppose, a reasonably expensively assembled squad. And I think he'll get away with it this season. I don't think he'll get in the top 4. I think he'll probably end up kind of mid-table, which is hardly the end of the world. But I think unless they start next season, if that does happen, I think unless they start next season well, then he comes under pressure. Yeah,
I mean, but I was thinking of the support, and I mean, certainly the Edinburgh City fans, very noisy as they've tended to be, particularly Meadowbank. There's a wee clutch of fans, probably about 20, 25 of them, all just jump about with each other. Just great fun. Just men behaving badly and just having a really good time there. And they were chanting songs at the Spartans. So the Spartans were down on the far end, the bit that disappears into the corner. Remember where that Stranraer fan ran onto Stranraer fans ran onto the pitch? That's how they were based. They were singing songs backwards and forwards at each other. And when I say backwards and forwards, the Spartans came back with about 2 or 3 of them, like, what a shitey home support or something. And then just Edinburgh fans just chanting at them the entire time. So I think it's a small fan base. And I was a bit disappointed that there weren't more Spartans fans there for it, because it's only down the road. And it's like your derby. Your derby match. It's like quite small potatoes in the grand scheme of derbies, but that's the sort of thing you should really be excited for. But they didn't seem, there certainly weren't many of them, and they didn't seem particularly all that fussed, really. But it's a kind of performance, just lack of creativity, what easily pulled apart, and just second best for most of the game. So it'll be interesting to see. I think Spartans will be in training tonight. This is Tuesday night. We're recording this, so I think there'll be I'm going to assume a big debrief or a get together to talk about what happened and find out how doing it. And it's a pity that we don't hear from Dougie Samuel. I think we said that last time. It'd be great to hear from them. It helps when we're doing these podcasts, and I suppose as supporters, just helps contextualise things and help give us a better understanding of how and why things happen. That's why Michael McIndoe's such a compelling listen, because he comes out after every game and explains, and he's always got something interesting to say. Michael Tidser spoke about him, always something interesting to say. Gary Naismith, John McGlynn. I've just listed managers now, you know. But it's all guys that have got something interesting to say, and it'd be really nice to know what Samuel thinks. But there's mostly it's just sort of like the odd match highlights that go up and stuff on their social media. So it'd be interesting to see. But yeah, a very, very bad day at the office for the Spartans.
Yeah, but it did look like you had an enjoyable Saturday afternoon.
It was brilliant, man. It was great. I think I've said it before, man, but my favourite thing is when I write someone off, you know, or I think someone's shit. See if I get proven wrong. That's my favourite thing. I think my favourite Steny players, guys who I've written off, but have turned out to be excellent players for the club. And it's the same with like Michael McIndoe, for going thinking this guy's a total weirdo, to thinking I actually think he's the best manager, pound for pound, the best manager in Scotland at the moment. Like looking at these guys like, who the fuck's Innes Lawson? What are you signing guys for civil service roles for? It turns out he's one of the most up and coming young attackers in League Two. So it's crazy. It's crazy how it works, and that's why I've got a pretty big soft, being pretty obvious that I've got a pretty big soft spot for the club, and I really hope it can continue over the course of the season, and they can get promoted. But Shaughan, up next we mentioned there Elgin City versus Edinburgh City.
I'll go for a draw. Elgin have been in a kind of reasonably poor kind of burst of form at this moment in time, but I do think Edinburgh could get something from it, even though it's a kind of long away day. And
the other one, this is interesting, Clyde versus the Spartans.
I will go for Clyde, a team that has a good home record and dreadful away form, so I'll go for Clyde.
Excellent. Well, fair play. I think, Shaughan, we will leave it at that. But just one final anecdote from my time at Saturday. As I was leaving the ground there, I was speaking to Charlie Mulgrew as well and clapping the players off the pitch. A woman came up to me, and it turns out it was the grandmother of Josh Grigor, the Edinburgh City defender. Class. And she asked me, was like, I watch you guys every week in the telly, when you's back on. Well, we are back on business on Friday. A View from the Terrace is back for its second block of episodes. It's the first episode of 2025. It will be available from noon on Friday on the iPlayer, and it'll go out and broadcast on the BBC Scotland channel at 10:30 p.m. So we had our production meeting on Monday night. We've probably got enough stuff for about like 3 or 4 episodes about the amount of stuff that we're talking about it. So it's class, and it's myself, Fowler, Joel Sked, Shaughan McGuigan that are doing it as well. So let's be honest, that's the guys that you want to be hearing from. I'm
looking forward to it. I hope Josh Grigor's grandmother enjoys it too.
Yeah, me too. I think that she asked her daughter, Josh Grigor's mum, can we get a photo? So Josh Grigor was sent a photograph of me and his granny earlier. So there's definitely one for the scrapbook there, Josh. I'm sure.
What a Saturday for Josh.
I know. A 5-0 win against your rivals, and a photo of a washed up has-been TV presenter with your gran. Fucking class.
I must have just received it, but like, for fuck's sake.
Straight into just reacted with a thumbs up emoji, and that's it. Switched his phone off, put it in a drawer, left it there for the rest of the evening. But Shaughan, we are going off to record a bonus podcast. It's the sequel to last week's episode, yes, where we said, like, which championship manager would you most like to go for a pint for? Mm-hmm. It's which League One manager would you most like to go for a pint with? And if you thought it was Andy Graham and 10 other cunts, you're probably right. Sorry, Andy Graham, 9 other cunts. You're probably right.
But I believe you're doing the kind of legwork on this one,
Yes.
and I'm just kind of nodding my head and agreeing or disagreeing.
Yes, I have. But I've just giving you a wee sneak peek into how the list is looking. So if you want to hear that podcast, please subscribe to our Patreon. It's Terrace. I think it's patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. There is dozens and dozens of podcasts up there, and they can be all yours for as little as £2 a month. So Shaughan and I are going to do that. And until then, please, if you're going to a game of football at the weekend, enjoy yourself. But unlike Brian Johnson bursting into his son's room to look at his erections, please do so respectfully. Thank you.